Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. Today's program is about public service. If you are a veteran, if you have served your country and you are thinking about public service, this is the episode for you. We talk with Dwight Boddorf and Ray Kerr, both of them working in the Tarentum region of Pittsburgh, which is kind of north. We kind of talk about that. We talk a bit about their service. If you've watched the Scuttlebutt for some time, you know Dwight from some previous episodes, but he got in touch with me and he said, hey, I'd love to talk about veterans serving after service. And can we do that? I said, yes, definitely, because we need more veterans serving not only in politics, in Congress, but in public service, as police officers, as ambulance drivers, volunteering to help clean up the community. The experience that veterans have is so needed in this realm because everything that they are bringing to the table, the sense of community, the sense of helping each other out, we talk about all of that is really is front and center when you go into public service. I really enjoyed this conversation with Dwight and Ray, and we get into a bit about how you are able to do that. If you're kind of lost in the, where do I go? Who do I talk to? What website do I go to? We're going to have all of that in the description. Dwight is a perfect resource for this. He has committed his life after service to public service. I think these are two great role models for this reason. And I hope you enjoyed the episode too. Please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know whenever we release new episodes. And if you need to reach out to me, it's Sean, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Welcome to the program, Dwight Boddorf and Ray Kerr. Dwight, you've been on the Scuttlebutt a couple times. Excited to have you back for the program. Can you give us an update on where you're at and sort of the topic that we want to cover today? And Ray, of course, welcome as well. We're going to get to you in just a sec.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me back. My name is Dwight Boddorf. I am the newly minted borough manager for Tarentum Borough. When I was on the show before, I served as the Chief Veterans Affairs Officer for Allegheny County. And prior to that, I ran public affairs and patient advocate for the VA healthcare system. I am a former Marine and served in Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Thank you so much, Dwight. And Ray, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me. Like my name, like you said, is Ray Kerr. I'm on Tarentum Council. This is my second tour on Tarentum Council. I was on a few years back, then got off. And we had somebody resign from council, and I got a couple phone calls asking me if I'd consider putting my name back in, which I did, and I was voted in 2 years ago. And I'm retired from Allegheny Ludlam Steel Mill. It's ATI now. And I retired back in 2003, and just, live in town, raise my grandkids like a lot of people are, enjoying life every day.
Very nice. And Ray, you are an Army veteran.
Yes, sir.
And you said your years were 70, 71?
70 and 71. In the lottery in 69, my birthday was the 19th number picked. So it was like I was packing my bags right then. I knew I was going. I went into the Army figuring I was going to go to Vietnam, even though it was towards the end of the Vietnam War. But I was sole surviving son, and I didn't have to go overseas unless I volunteered or re-enlisted. So I just put my 2 years in. I was drafted, but I enlisted for the 2 years because a recruiter got credit, and it didn't do anything to my time or anything. So I did him a favor, I guess.
Is it a tough spot to be in that, you're in and there's this sort of option, this sort of like gray area of where like you could go, but you choose not to go? I've not spoken with anybody who was not sort of forced to go during that Vietnam time, or just didn't serve in that arena because they weren't made to go there. So in your particular position, how did you sort of reconcile, like, I'm doing my service, but I don't need to be deployed?
Well, they don't tell you, meaning the Army doesn't tell you about being sole surviving son until the end of basic training. So I went in, like I tell people, I went into basic training. I was going to be like another John Wayne or Audie Murphy, because I figured I was going to Vietnam. And I came out of base, the top 5 or 10% of each basic training class comes out in E2, private E2. You're allowed to wear a stripe, you get a couple more dollars. And I came out in E2, and at graduation, I asked the captain when we got our orders, and I was going to Fort Eustis, Virginia. I asked the captain about it, and that's when he explained that to me. But before that, I had no idea. My relatives had no idea. You know, they were just like sad to see me go.
Right.
And most of them, I hope. And so when I got down to Fort Eustis, I took it as a job, and I knew I was just going to put the 2 years in. So I just did my job, and it's like being a civilian. You do your 8 to 4, 9 to 5 job, but back then it's like 5:30 to 5 type job. And I put my time in, and being that I was about 4.5 hours from home, that's pushing it from Virginia. I grew up in Freeport, Pennsylvania, just up the river.
Right.
I was home, you know, 1 weekend a month, because Fridays or Saturdays and Sundays really didn't have a lot to do. I was in an AIT detachment, and
AIT, that stands for
Advanced Individual Training or Advanced Infantry Training.
Gotcha.
And I was in the 714th Transportation Battalion, Railway Operating Steam and Diesel Electric. It was the last railroad battalion in the Army.
Oh, wow.
And we trained permanent party and reservists in a railroad MOS. So I get my job done on Friday, and I was done till Monday morning. So it, you know, my wife teases me. She's the only one that knows. I'm the only one she ever heard of commuted to the Army.
Well, being sole survivor, I mean, that's a real thing. It's a big responsibility to be that last sole survivor of the family, and the Army thankfully respects that and says, you know, we're not going to send you into a life-threatening situation.
Yes, correct.
At that time, did you, and this will get to our main question of this episode, at that time, did you think about public service at all?
Not a whole lot. I was 18, you know, when
Invincible.
I went in, you know, so not a whole lot. I just, you know, I worked a little job at it used to be a little sports shop in Freeport, and I worked there, and I opened it up at 10 in the morning, and the owners came at 5 because they had other jobs. And then when the mill was hiring, I put my name in, I filled out an application, got hired. So not a whole lot, you know. Like
but
I
there
said,
was
I was
something.
18, just, pardon me.
So you stayed within that community for long enough that you felt like helping to serve the community in a bigger way was sort of a calling eventually.
Yes.
And that sort of leads us to sort of this big idea that Dwight had emailed me about, this idea of, okay, you've served your country by being in the military. Then you get out, and you should, you know, there are ways to further serve into public service. And should you do that? Would you want to do that? And we know that a very select few of veterans are serving throughout public service, not just Congress, you know, the White House, wherever. So there's certain experience and expertise that each veteran is going to bring to that arena that we would hope to have. And it's about finding the veterans who want to be able to continue service in that way. Dwight, you know, what makes you passionate about this?
A number of things, you know, working with numerous military veterans over the years and various government roles, you know, I've come across a lot of veterans who kind of ask themselves the question of, will I ever do anything as meaningful again as when I was in the military? And a lot of them kind of chase that of, how do I get back to doing something impactful and meaningful? And for a lot of people, the answer is some form of public service. It's a way to do something bigger than yourself and to give back in a different type of scenario. So, we know that there's a lot of veterans who go into the police force, for example. They do get a few extra points. We know that like a third of the entire federal government is made up of veterans. They get preferences. It starts to fall off a little in local government. It's not as high as a percentage, but they are there. We also see a lot of veterans who run for political offices, from the lowest level of government all the way up to Congress and, of course, previous presidents who have served. So I think it's something that's kind of gets ingrained into you while you're in the service. And then for a lot, once they get out, is how do we get back to that realm of making a difference?
Got a lot of questions. I love that idea of as meaningful as your military service. How did you personally decide to go into public service?
Either before or after the military?
After.
Oh, so well, I kind of fell into it, to be honest with you. When I came back from the military, I think we discussed before on the show. I got hurt pretty severely, and that kind of derailed any plans that I had. And so I ended up working at Penn State part-time in their veterans office. And that led to a lot of interactions with fellow veterans who were having similar experiences and circumstances that I was. And they didn't know anything about their benefits, their publicly earned benefits for their service, their GI Bill, their home loans, their health care. And it kind of clicked on me at that point of like, well, why aren't we doing a better job of letting these people know how to access the benefits that in a lot of cases, they've shed their blood for.
Yeah.
And a couple of years after doing that and routinely in that thing, and I said, you know what, I can do this. I can continue to help other veterans. And so that led into a career over the last 15 years in some sort of public service, helping military veterans in various forms of government. And I am now at the point in my career that, I can help more than just veterans. I've learned so many things about government operations at all various levels that I can help a broader population while still helping veterans. But now I can help, I can help a town, I can help a city, I can help a county achieve kind of the best things for them. And it maybe steer a few other people also towards public service to make things better for their local communities.
That sounds it sounds almost too difficult to handle in the sense of if I can help out a group of veterans, that seems pretty manageable. But as you sort of build that into community and city and, expand that bubble, does it get more difficult? Or, the mouths to feed become more, much more differentiated?
That's a good question. So yes and no. It's a different type of challenge and difficulties. So when you're focused on one kind of subpopulation, veterans in that case, the needs are very diverse. So, you're dealing with people that need help getting a job. You're dealing with people that might need help with their VA healthcare, but you're also dealing with homelessness, substance abuse. Maybe their healthcare isn't working out so great for them. You've got federal benefits, state benefits, local benefits, and navigating those complex systems. Whereas kind of where I'm at now, you're thinking more in terms of macro. You're looking at, what is the finances of this town, and, how can we help businesses as a whole, maybe not so much the individual. But I don't have to deal with such the emotional kind of burden or trauma that I did before. I'm not directly responsible if somebody is able to get off the street, or if somebody relapses back into substance addiction and things like that. So there's trade-offs. It is, a lot of responsibility. But I think there's pros and cons to each of them, and which certainly is why different types of people gravitate towards different fields in public service. You have your social workers in public service, you have your police, you have your accountants, and then you have people like me who are managing, cities and towns and things like that in consultation with our elected officials.
Ray, what do you think makes veterans so unique to be able to handle these challenges in a way that maybe a civilian might not think about?
Well, first off, from working at a steel mill with thousands of people, we used to kind of joke. You could tell who was in the military and who wasn't when we were younger, because you learn to grow up in the military pretty quickly. I was never really away from home until I went to basic training, and without my family. And I think that because of that, you get an understanding for teamwork. And it's like a phrase thrown out there now, but to cover somebody's six, to cover their back, and not to put yourself first, to worry about whether it's who you're working with in the mill, or who you're on council with, or the people in town. Playing, I played baseball, I played a lot of softball. I got into coaching when we had kids, and to put the other person first. And if everybody does that, everything runs a lot smoother. And I just, I don't worry about myself so much, because, I can handle myself. I try to help the other person out. And especially like in council in Trentham, some of the things we're involved in, we're looking out for our constituents, our citizens, and our businesses. And I think the main thing, like I said, is worry about the other person. If everybody would care about the other person and not themselves, I think everything would run a lot smoother.
True.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think so. And, definitely the piece of when you're in the military, you grow up a lot faster than everybody around you. Yes. So you have, and it is about the other guy in the military. Yes. You can't be a one-man army. You have to work as a community. So you're coming out with that sort of ingrained in you of like, I'm going to help everybody that I can so that we can all succeed.
Yes. And the military teaches you how to deal with and overcome adversity. There's a pretty famous saying in the Marine Corps, adapt and overcome, which is option, failure is not an option for many military members as well as veterans. You find a way to make it work. So when you are in a public service situation and you're coming up against these things that really seem impossible, how do we balance a $10-15 million budget without raising taxes? Also, while that these things need redone, you have to pave roads, and inflation has gone up 40%. How do you budget all that? It's almost impossible. Yeah. But one of the great things that the military taught us is there is a way. You will find a way to make all of those things work. And so a lot of veterans have that attitude that translates well to public service, of that adapt and overcome, and find a way to make it work in a manner that's good for everybody. That that and you lean on your relationships and resources, just like the military. I couldn't do half the things that I do if I didn't have a good relationship with Ray and the rest of council. Just like in the military, you rely on the person to your left and your right of you, and public service is very similar to
that. Ray, why did you decide to go into council?
Well, the first time I was asked by the borough manager and our solicitor at the time if I'd consider going. I was the solicitor and I were friends. Our daughters played soccer together, youth soccer all through high school, and I decided to try it. And it just seems when I don't like to join a lot of things because I want to get involved. I was a deacon at church for 6 years. 5 of the 6, I was president, because I get active when I join things. So when I was asked and considered, talked it over with my wife, and I, came on council, I actually enjoyed it. The group of council people I was with, we all got along, we worked together, and it was a good experience. And then I could sense there was some politics coming in. And even though I'm a councilman, I'm not a politician. And, I went.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you define the difference in that for me? Because I would think councilman, I would think politician, but I would correlate those, and they're not necessarily the same, right?
No,
And
not at all.
why is that?
In my opinion, a councilman works for the borough or the entity he's a councilman in, works for them, for the betterment of the town.
Mhm.
A politician, even though he's working for the town, he's in it for himself.
Okay.
He wants his name put first. Every idea he wants credit for.
Mhm.
And I don't do interviews. The first time I was on, we had a real good reporter from the newspaper in town here. And the first time he wanted to interview me after a council meeting, I pointed to the borough manager and I said, you can talk to him. He makes the big bucks. Okay. Because I don't care if my name gets in a paper.
Yeah.
It's because I'm not here to get my name in a paper. A politician is putting themselves first, in my opinion.
Which is a big no-no in the military.
Yes, correct.
Right, which is part of one of those reasons I think that veterans make good public service personnel and elected officials, certainly at the local level. They're more concerned about what's best for the town, what's best for the county, not what's necessarily best for me. There's always exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, you'll find that the veterans that are involved in a lot of the public service jobs, whether that's elected or appointed, really do care more about what's going on in their local area than what's, what the job can do for them.
Mm-hmm. And so, Ray, you were saying that you felt some politics were starting to come in. How did you respond to it?
I was up for re-election, and I actually told people not to vote for me. That I didn't want to have to resign.
Reverse psychology. That's smart.
So I didn't even vote for myself.
Yeah.
So and I was done with it. I was satisfied with the job I did. Mm-hmm. And everything, and went about, like I said, my wife and I have raised 3 grandkids. Mm-hmm. And we still have a 15-year-old granddaughter who's a sophomore at Highlands High School, and our 19-year-old grandson went one semester to Penn State New Ken, made the dean's list, but he wanted to take some time off, and he has a good full-time job, and he's still at home. And our oldest one is working, and he's living out in Sarver, and on the other side of Freeport, and doing well. But yeah, when this came up again, I asked my wife, of course, got to get permission, and she said, "Well, it's up to you. You'll do what you want to do." So I decided to come back on council, and everything cleared off. A few of the people that had been on council that I thought were getting too political, were on it for the wrong reasons, had left, and we have a good council right now.
Do you think people that are very political like that leave council because it's not about them, because it's more about everyone else?
Yes, or whatever their issues were or reasons were to get on council had passed.
Yeah.
Over the years, not in Trentham, but other communities, I know people that got involved in the politics because they wanted to do something to get it approved in that community or that entity. Right. And they were on just long enough to achieve their personal goal, and then got off.
I love this conversation because I really did correlate public service with politics. And I see now that it can be a separate thing, despite the fact that even if you're a councilor, you could be elected, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're political or you're a politician. Dwight, but speaking along these lines, people say after 9/11, the country was together. Everybody had a common goal. Everybody was working together. Things are obviously very different now, 22 years later. How, over the course of your time, now I know it doesn't date back 22 years, but over the course of your time in public service, how have you navigated this field where people start to feel more divided than wanting to work together?
That's a good question. I think the best thing that you can do if you are an appointed official like myself is stay neutral, stay apolitical. I've taken great pains to make sure that I don't, publicly, and most people, even people who've known me for 10, 15 years, would have a hard time telling you if I lean left or right, because, I make it a point not to discuss that. There are techniques that you can certainly utilize that people will infer things, whether that's maybe not exactly the way that you lean. Just being kind of proactive with your communication and personable, and boiling the issues down to the issue at hand and not the greater political implications. So there are examples of that, certainly at the national level and the local level. We know that there's a lot of housing crisis things going on, right? And how we can deal with that at the local level without getting involved in the wider political spectrum and comments is, what does that look like specifically in our town, and what are our needs in our town, regardless of what's going on outside? We know
Right.
that we're landlocked here in Tarentum. We don't have that many additional housing opportunities. What can we do here locally to, make housing available and affordable for residents that has nothing to do with the politics of the outside world?
And what would you say in that vein is the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job is maintaining that neutrality. You have people that you are equally responsible for and equally have to work with. Over the years, I've worked very closely with congressmen and congresswomen and senators from both sides of the aisle, both at the federal level, the state level, the local level, and part of the challenge is when you have something that you want to work on, oftentimes people will interject their politics into it. Oh, my opponent doesn't want to do this, or, we really could help the veterans if it wasn't for this political party. And you have to kind of navigate back away from that, because you do have to work with both sides. Part of the thing as a public servant, as an appointed official, is we don't necessarily set policy. We leave that to Ray and to all of the other elected officials. We enact the policy. We create the actual procedures for things to happen, and you cannot do that in a political manner. Otherwise, you're going to have all kinds of problems. And so the most difficult thing for me, certainly over the years, has been to stay neutral. You have people. So when I was at the county, mostly the county leadership leans to one side, and people would automatically then assume that, therefore, because I worked for that organization, I must lean to that side. And they would make all kinds of assumptions about how we're going to handle veteran situations and policies, which were not necessarily true. So keeping that neutrality definitely is an everyday task.
You would certainly hope, and my personal opinion is I would hope that veteran issues is everyone's issues. That's, across the board, and especially nowadays where it's veterans are really embraced. That hasn't always been the case. Ray, how have you seen the perception of veterans and veterans serving in public service change over the course of your lifetime? Because back in the 70s, it was very different.
Well, we're a little unique because even though we're in Allegheny County, we're the last area. We're almost in the Butler County or Armstrong County, just up the road.
So north of Pittsburgh, anybody listening from outside the area.
Yeah. If you look at a map, we're approximately 30 miles from downtown Pittsburgh if you go up the Allegheny River. So, so we didn't have everything you hear about the Vietnam veterans coming home and that. We didn't have a lot of that. They just came home and they got their jobs, everything, went back to work. And their attitude, my attitude when I got out of the military, I don't think it changed. It was more like a small town attitude. And you kind of went back to your routine. You went to your former high school football games on Friday nights, and then you played basketball against kids or guys from down the road. They came up to your town, or you played some pickup football, and everybody kind of got along. And we didn't have like a lot of the problems that you hear the stories other people had in some of the bigger cities and everything. So as far as like public service goes, I know a lot of veterans that got involved one way or the other, whether it was like with the scouts, the little leagues, the youth football, youth basketball. They did something to help the community. And granted, a lot of times it's because they had a kid.
Yeah.
And your son or your daughter would show up, so you're going to be there. That's how I got into coaching baseball here in Trenton. I took my son down and I sat in the bleachers and watched. And I told my wife, I think I know a little more than they do. And so I'd ask her, could I help coach?
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. But being in the military, especially towards the end of the Vietnam War, because I got out in 71 and it ended in 73. So they were giving a lot of early outs at the time. Mm-hmm. If you served in Vietnam, you got out a couple months earlier or 3 months earlier, whatever. And so as it was winding down, our area, our valley, the Alakiski Valley, I don't think had the problems that a lot of the country had. So guys came back and, we all got along. And at the time, you argued more over Pitt Penn State games than you did politics.
Right.
And again, back then we had 3 television stations, Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 11. And then you got the news was all the same. It's just what personality did you like to watch better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I haven't been around as long as Ray has been in some of the politics and stuff, but I've seen a shift in the last couple of years, certainly. Mm-hmm. It used to be that, much like Ray was saying, a lot of things just you're veteran in the public service, and it kind of wasn't neither here nor there. When I first started my career, veterans often got a lot of deference. Whether you were left or right, it didn't really matter. You were put in some of these positions, especially in higher level government, because you were a veteran. You automatically come with a little bit of a authority, a little bit of morality, a little bit of deference. People just assume that you're an upstanding thing, and that used to buy you quite a bit of goodwill. And then anymore, though, we're seeing that just as the country as a whole, if one side identifies you with the other side, even if you are a veteran and you've been in the space for however long, then automatically your opinions and thoughts and things are no longer valid. They're no good. You're a terrible human being. And it doesn't really matter if you're left or right. It's just the opposite side does it to each other. And it's unfortunate that people who've spent 20, 30, 40, 50 years of their life, from the military to federal service and things, of giving back and trying to make the community better, are just, all of that's taken away by a slight political affiliation.
And in the same vein, and I'm thinking of the next question in both sort of positive view and negative view, and also in the idea of a veteran who may find this podcast, say, I'm thinking about going into public service. What should I anticipate? And this is the idea of public perception of veterans. What is the positive public perception of veterans in public service, and what is a negative public perception of veterans in service that we could sort of demystify a bit?
Sure. I mean,
you want to take it?
Yeah, you've got a few. You still have the lingering PTSD stereotype that is still around in many different environments. A lot of organizations are getting better about that. There's more training, there's more understanding of what's happening, but unfortunately that still does exist, and that will hold you back. you also have the problem of, even though it's technically against the law, some employers are hesitant to hire people who are National Guard or have other commitments because they know they're going to be gone, a couple times a year for the military commitment.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those unspoken things that even if you go into things like policing, firefighter, that can be held against you. On the positive side of that, and things that people can expect, a lot of places you still get that kind of deference of, your service. You bring a lot to the table, you can handle adversity, you've seen things that most people wouldn't see. So even if you're younger, that often affords you, you've had leadership training and experience that a lot of people your age didn't have. And so that can lead to promotions faster. That can lead to more responsibilities that you normally wouldn't get at that age compared to your peers. So there's a lot of good. The good certainly outweighs the bad, I would say. You also, public service, I would argue, is getting harder. Things are much more transparent, which is good. Transparency is always good in public service and government, but there's a lot of expectations for public service to meet all of these needs and demands that didn't used to exist. Nobody used to expect government to fulfill every single need. The local governments for years and years and years, our responsibility was taking care of roads and basic infrastructure, not hosting lots of festivals and helping everybody that has kind of a social services issue and all these things. And now we're more looked at as an all-encompassing body that whatever happens with our citizens, that we are responsible for, and that's becoming more and more of a challenge.
Hey, did you want to follow up on it?
Well, I think that today, being old, okay, my father, my uncles, my friends' fathers, all World War II veterans. Just about everybody know their dad was in World War II. And those guys came back, they were heroes. I mean, you watch the things about like liberating Paris and things in the parades they had, parades in New York, ticker tape parades. Those guys were heroes, and I grew up respecting those people. When somebody walks up to me and puts their hand out and says, "Thank you for your service," because I advertise more or less, with a hat, the shirt, the jacket, it has Army or American flag on it. I nowadays, at first I didn't know what to say to them. You're welcome, but now I say it was my honor because I felt that I wore the same uniform, and it's a different style from World War II or the Korean War or the Civil War, but it's still the same uniform that has been worn by American men since 1775.
Yeah.
And I think it's my honor to be able to be in that club as those men, as my dad in World War II.
Yeah.
And I think that today, because of what they see on television and certain people putting the military down, it's harder to get veterans involved in things. World War II ended. The guys and some women that were involved, they came home, and the guys went to work, went home, ate, got cleaned up, then ate. Then they joined organizations. They joined VFW, the American Legion, the Elks, the Eagles, the Moose, all the fraternal organizations. And I don't think they had some of the problems today because they were with like people and they were accepted. They accepted each other. Didn't matter if you were Marine, Navy, Air Force, Army. They might have teased each other, which we do today, as Dwight pointed out. But they were accepted, but today's society, they don't seem to be accepted the same.
Yeah.
People don't know their neighbors anymore. They live in, housing developments, and they can't just walk out and walk 10 feet to their neighbor's house.
Mm-hmm.
They drive to work. And I think that's a reason they don't get so much involved. And a lot of it's because of technology, and everything. And that's just the way it is. But I think more veterans would get involved if they would become part of the community. And that's partly up to them, and that's partly the way society is. They just don't become part of the community. And I always was the type of person that got involved in things. And like I said before, I always looked out playing baseball, softball for my teammates.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I was fortunate because I play with groups of guys that, of course, you want the bat when the winning run's on third with 2 outs. Okay.
Right.
And if it wasn't me, if it was somebody else, I was, praying for him and cheering for him to get that hit.
Yeah.
Just so we won.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I won, because I never won anything. We won and lost as a team. And I think veterans are used to that. You succeed or fail as a group of people.
Right.
Okay. And I think a lot of them don't want to get involved in things, but they should, because they would bring that to the table.
Yeah, I mean, public service can be a very rewarding career.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of benefits to it. You do get that shared sense of community. You get to help oftentimes the community that you live in. If you want to make your park better, if you want to make your street better, if you want to help your neighbors, public service and government jobs are definitely a way to do that. Public service also just isn't limited to the jobs themselves. You can volunteer for the fire departments and a lot of other like-minded organizations that give back to the community. So, even if you do have a job, say at, a for-profit industry, you can still be involved in public service in different avenues.
Say a veteran shows up in Tarentum, moves there or is from there, comes back, you find out about it. You go and talk to them, and how do you, just like you just said, how do you encourage them to go into public service there in your community? It's like, what do you sell them? What do you sell them on?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of things. It depends on what they're looking for, right? So we do have a lot of the veterans that come back and they feel a little bit lost. They feel like, you lose your tribe, so to speak, when you get out of the military. These people that life and death situations, you form very, very strong relationships with. And a lot of people, when they come back, even if they do have, friends from high school or college or whatever, it's not quite the same. So oftentimes a good selling point for these types of things, whether that's the VFW, for example, offers that camaraderie, but so do things like the fire department, the volunteer fire department, or serving on a community council or a board to help, reintegrate that veteran back into the community, but also make meaningful decisions, or in some cases help save people's lives, which some of those veterans, that's the type of things that they're looking for. I again, we go back to, depends on what that individual veteran is looking for, what we would push them towards. If they're looking for a job to support themselves, or if they're looking for a career, there are many benefits to public service. And there's a lot of things that specifically for veterans to help them get a job in the public sector that are not available to civilians. And so we push them towards those type of avenues.
Such as?
So you get veterans preference for the federal government and the state government. So you get an automatic 5-point preference for being a veteran. If you have a certain disability level, you get 10-point preference. So, and that oftentimes is the difference between being a top candidate and being kind of a mid-tier candidate. It also comes down to, if you have 2 candidates that basically score exactly the same, the government will go with the veteran over the non-veteran if the score is similar.
When you say score, what do you mean by score?
So when you test for like a federal job, for example, they score you based off of your experiences in your education, and oftentimes you'll have to answer questions, how good are you at project management on a scale from 1 to 10 and X, Y, and Z. So they'll take all that information and they'll score you.
Yeah.
You get additional points if you are a veteran or a disabled veteran.
Mm-hmm.
They can help you into the job. There are also certain jobs that are only open to veterans. So in the federal government, there are different types of jobs. There's jobs that are open to all citizens. There's jobs that are for military only. There's jobs that are for recent college graduates. And then there's a whole slew of categories for veterans only, for disabled veterans only, for spouses of veterans. Mm-hmm. So the federal government really does encourage, and so does the state government, encourage veterans to apply. You will see a lot of local governments that also have either veterans preferences. This is particularly important in the police forces. You'll see a lot of police, the state police and things like that do provide veterans preference. There's also a few different benefits too. So depending on what type of government you're in, you might be able to buy back your military service towards retirement. So instead of spending 20 years in an organization, you might be able to only spend 10 or 15, and they will give you credit and you buy back your military time as a discount. So you can retire, 10, 15 years earlier than most people in your organization could because of your military service. So there are definitely benefits to going into public service as a veteran that you wouldn't normally get.
This sounds like something, is this newer or is this something that's been around for forever? Because this sounds like, a nice benefit that I may not have known about a long time ago.
Yeah, so some of these programs have been around since,
as far as I know, like the post office, for instance.
Yeah.
If
there are lots of veterans, work at the post office.
People put in for a job at the post office, and one's a veteran, and they have to take a test. The veteran gets so many points added to his score.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's a big help.
The veterans hiring preference has been around for quite a long time. Now there are some newer benefits. So like the special kind of provisions for hiring veterans that are disabled, those are newer. I know particularly the ones for spouse preference, that's newer. Mm-hmm. And you are seeing more and more state governments that are trying to create specific programs for veterans, whether that's a hiring preference, sometimes it's a tax credit for organizations that hire veterans. Sometimes it's direct licensing transition. So if you, for example, drive trucks, a 7-ton in the military for years and years and years, you got a military grade CDL, but you would come back to your home state or wherever, and you'd still have to go through the CDL training and spend the money and get recertified.
Right.
Well, you're seeing more and more states that are saying, well, that's not necessary. If you can pass the test, you already have the training and the experience from the military. And that's good for not just private sector jobs, but public sector jobs.
Yeah.
Our public works folks, a lot of them have to have CDLs. And so if we were able to get somebody who already has that experience, instead of either us paying for it or training somebody, it's easier to bring somebody in that has that experience, and we can just get them tested, and then they become part of the team.
Right.
So more and more places are trying to get different avenues to help veterans back into jobs.
What is the best way and maybe the fastest way to get involved? Is it going onto the government website, the local government website? How do you look for the thing you say, okay, well, I was a machine gunner, well, how do I translate those skills into public service?
Yeah, that's a good question. It still vexes many businesses and people. I would say there's a couple different places you could go. The VA, love it or hate it, people have mixed feelings on it. They are an excellent resource for helping you get involved with lots of things. So whether that's jobs and resume building and getting into federal government or state government or local government, VA is often one of the first places people go to. Okay. In Pennsylvania, the Department of Labor and Industry has what's called DevOps and So they are disabled veterans personnel, and what they do is they help veterans that are disabled and regular veterans get jobs.
Yeah.
So their entire job is helping veterans get jobs. So they
Mhm.
are all over the state. Then you have local organizations such as, and here in Pittsburgh, we have Pittsburgh Hires Veterans that can
Mhm.
help with that. You also have a lot of the colleges, right? So people often overthink, well, I have to have a degree from the college for them to help me. That's not necessarily the case.
Okay.
The Community College of Allegheny campus or Allegheny County runs a really cool program that if you are a resident of Allegheny County, their career services division will help you find a job and write a resume and interview, whether or not you've actually been to school there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they have people that specifically help with veterans, that's translating military skills and things like that and getting jobs. So there's a lot of really great resources at the federal level and the local level. You just kind of got to know where to look.
Yeah.
If all else fails and you can't figure it out, go to the VA. They will be able to point you to federal and local resources.
What would be now, sort of going back to the genesis of this idea when you emailed me and said, "Hey, I want to talk about this." What would be your hopeful call to action for anybody who may find this podcast? Any veteran that might be searching?
Yeah, reach out to fellow veterans, reach out to people in public service. It is a very rewarding career. And frankly, we need more of you. We need more veterans in public service. There is a turnover happening in public service. The previous generation is exiting the workforce. There is not enough people with experience that are taking these positions like borough managers and things that are in state, directors of county. Veterans are a great resource to help fill that gap, and it's very rewarding to boot. So it benefits everybody. If you are struggling and you don't kind of know how to break into that sector, you can always reach out to the International County Management Association. So they are a very big organization across the country. They have a veteran specific program that helps you get into local government and state government jobs. That's actually how I kind of in a roundabout way came to this job. Is they have a veterans in government fellowship, and they will connect you with other veteran public servants in your area. So they will go down through the roster and they'll say, hey, you know what? There's 4 other borough managers in Allegheny County that are veterans that we're going to put you in contact with. And through those connections, they can help you get into local government, understand the space a little bit more, meet with elected officials that might be able to tell you a little bit more about their town and their operations and what they need.
I'm gonna hit you up after our recording to get some of these websites so that we can have them all here in the chat or in the description for anybody who's going to be looking for this. It'll be as easy as scrolling down and clicking on a link, and it'll be right there. Ray, same question to you. What would be your call to action to get more veterans more involved?
Wow. Now Dwight has a background in this, so I'm not going to sound as good as he did. But for me, when somebody gets out of the service and I run into them and I thank them for their service and talk to them about it, and kind of ask them, what's going on, you have a job, or things like that, to get them involved, just to talk to them. And sometimes it's not talking to them that get them involved, it's listening to them, because a lot of times they need somebody to talk to. And there's veteran programs. I'm involved with Team Red, White, and Blue. Not big time. I do one event a year because of my family situation and that's keeping the American flag going on 9/11 from 5:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night up Natrona Heights. It's a mile walk down, a mile walk back, and we keep at least one flag going the whole time. And I talked to a lot of veterans up there, and it's, get involved, maybe not jump in with both feet right away into public service, but get involved in something. get involved with, there's a lot of veterans organizations now to help today's veterans, people like Dwight, okay, that came back. These people today are, I don't know, is it 1% of our population's in the military?
Less than
They're
less than
carrying-
1/2 of 1%.
Okay, they're carrying the load.
Yeah.
And they're trained to do everything that nobody wants to hear about.
Mhm.
Okay. And when they come back, it's going like from darkness to light, or however you want to phrase that. And they need something to get rid of all this energy they have inside them, everything that they've been taught in the military and they've been involved with when they've been deployed. And so get involved with some type of veterans group, like-minded people.
Yeah.
And then get involved with your church. A lot of churches will welcome veterans with open arms.
Yeah.
Get involved with the church. You don't have to go gung-ho and, over the top, so to speak, in your involvement. Just do a little bit. Get involved with youth groups.
Mhm.
A lot of veterans have a lot that they can teach the youth groups.
Definitely.
See if your local high school has anything going on. See if they need somebody to speak at schools on Veterans Day. And just take it slow, get involved easy. And then if you enjoy it, then start looking at your local governments and seeing what they need. We do things in Trenton like cleanup days and things like that we have some veterans that, and you don't even know they're veterans. A lot of them, I wear the flag every day type. I'm that type of veteran. And a lot of them aren't that way.
Right.
They just, but they just, they want to get involved, but they don't know how.
So it doesn't matter about your age. Like,
no,
no,
not at all.
Yeah, I mean, public services for all ages of military veterans. And to Ray's point, just getting involved in anything will help kind of guide you in the right direction. And for many people, that's how they eventually end up in public services. Maybe they start small. Maybe they started a cleanup day and say, hey, you know what, this is pretty cool. I had no idea our governments did this type of thing. And that just leads them to getting progressively more involved until next thing they know, they're sitting in a chair interviewing with somebody about their public service.
You've made it.
There's a lot of veterans that are looking for people to help out. They'll drive other veterans to the VA hospitals.
Yeah.
Or to doctor's appointments, things like that.
Or volunteer at the court. And I know a couple veterans who do that.
Yes.
Well, excellent. This is all really excellent information for any veteran who might be looking to go into public service, and the positives of it, why it's so important. I think it continues to feed that desire, that passion for serving the country. You're serving the community. I have to say, though, here at the end, I would be remiss. One of our sponsors is D&D Auto Salvage, and I believe they have a metal recycling there right in Tarentum. I know that's one of their metal recycling facilities is in Tarentum.
Yeah, it's right out of town, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Sun Mine Road.
Maybe, yeah. I know whenever I do, like, we have our sponsor at the end of the program. If you watch through our final here, if you're a viewer, you'll hear me thank D&D for sponsoring the Scuttlebutt. But I'm glad that we had.
It's a Trentham address.
Yeah.
Okay, which goes pretty far out.
Yeah, it's side note, it's weird. So technically the Pittsburgh Mills is Tarentum, but it is nowhere near the borough.
It's in Fraser Township.
Oh, see, this is the weird thing about Pittsburgh. If you're listening and you're like, what's wrong with Pittsburgh? It's because there's too many neighborhoods. I don't know where all are.
You hit the nail on the head right there. Yeah.
We have a school district that graduates less than 200 kids a year, and it's 4 communities.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Pittsburgh. And I'm south of the city, and everybody says, like, why don't you know the east or the north? And it's like, well, it's because that's through a tunnel, over a bridge, over another bridge. I just know that's north. Like,
yeah, because there's 30 municipalities in Allegheny County. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. And the only way
Yeah.
that we know how to tell people to get from one to the other is to say, go down that road and hit the McDonald's and hang a left, and you'll
Yes,
be sort of there.
Yes.
Uh-oh, I hear people coming in. So we're
Yeah.
gonna time this well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys both so much for being a part of the Scuttlebutt. To our audience, please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know whenever we release new episodes. Check out our description for the links if you want to get involved. Dwight and Ray, thank you so much for being a part of the Scuttlebutt. Some final words before we end.
Yeah, thank you very much, and please get involved. You know, whether that's a veterans organization or public service, get involved.
Yeah, and all the veterans out there, thank you for your service, and God bless you.
Thank you both. We'll hope to see you again on a future episode of the Scuttlebutt.
All right,
sounds good.
Thanks, Sean. Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'd like to take a moment to thank both of our sponsors, the first being D&D Metal Recycling and Auto Salvage. They began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s, but they've grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. D&D accepts all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any type of job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D. That's D&D Autosalvage.com. Thank you so much to D&D. They've been a sponsor for quite some time, and we really appreciate their support. The second being Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and to getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They're all about health. So they want people to quit, and they have classes and nicotine replacement therapy and a popular quit line, which is the easiest number to remember ever, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, and other nicotine products like vaping. Finally, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all of what Tobacco-Free Adagio Health offers at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org, or you can watch our recent episode with Tobacco-Free Adagio Health on the Scuttlebutt, where they talk about a lot of the programs that they offer for those who are looking to quit. Thank you to both of our sponsors for their continued support of the Scuttlebutt podcast. We really appreciate it. Thanks.